This is John Henry Weston for LifeSiteNews, bringing you breaking news from Archbishop Carlo Maria Viganò. This is super fascinating. He did an answer to us on a question, but for his answer, he actually employed AI to show something truly amazing. So what happened was this. I asked him for a reflection on the huge survey conducted by the Real Presence Coalition, the largest survey of Catholics in the United States history. And they found, of course, that by and large Catholics, and these are the Catholics who actually attend Mass every Sunday and don't miss, said number one cause for the loss of belief in the Eucharist is communion in the hand. It's got to be stopped. And they had other findings too, which you should go check out at LifeSiteNews.com, Real Presence Coalition. But listen to this. Here's what I asked the Archbishop. I said, could you comment on the findings of the largest survey of Catholics in the United States, which found that the number one reason for the loss of faith in the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist is communion in the hand? He replied this way. The poll conducted by the Real Presence Coalition confirms what was already evident when Paul VI authorized the modification of the discipline in this matter. First of all, it was clear that the so-called reforms imposed by a group of subversives, modernists, did not respond to any request from the grassroots. Neither did the Novus Ordo, nor the new ways of administering communion were the fruit of a real need of the ecclesial body. He says the opposite is true, however, that the so-called liturgical reform was intended to help spread the doctrine it contained among the clergy and the faithful, causing practice, that is praxis, to influence belief, or doxa. He says the concept summarized by the adage lex orandi, which means how we pray, lex credendi, how we believe, has been widely adopted by the proponents of the consular reform, but in reverse and maliciously. In this case, it is not, in fact, Orthodox belief, he says orthodoxia in the Greek, that determines Orthodox practice, but heterodox practice that shapes heterodox belief. The faithful who are asked to kneel to receive Holy Communion in the mouth are led by the gestures they make to recognize the real presence in the sacred species and to adhere to the corresponding Catholic doctrine. Similarly, the faithful who are asked not to kneel and to touch the host with their hands end up believing the heterodox doctrine insinuated by the Reformed rites. This doctrinal change is further favored when the ritual change replaces an entirely opposite practice. This shows unequivocally that those who meddled with the liturgy after the council knew very well what would be the disruptive scope of the Novus Ordo in corrupting the faith of the people of God. They did not explicitly modify the lex credendi, the way we believe, but wanted to express their deviations in the lex orandi, the way we pray, knowing full well that it would have been much easier to make people lose faith in the real presence by making them receive communion standing and in their hands, rather than preaching these errors from the pulpits while continuing to administer communion on their knees and in the mouth. The fact that the hierarchy has imposed standing and holding communion on the faithful has been perceived as a repudiation of the past and a rejection of previous doctrine. Now get this. He goes on to talk about how he employed AI to bolster his point. He says, the evidence for this reasoning is confirmed by an unusual source, ChatGPT, a conversational artificial intelligence app. I tried to interrogate ChatGPT not because I consider it a true form of intelligence, but because its data processing system identifies causal relationships on the mathematical model, and it is therefore interesting to see how an algorithm is able to detect what the mainstream narrative pretends not to see. So, super fascinating already. Are you ready for this? He continues. This is the question I asked. So this is Archbishop Viganò asks ChatGPT this question. Quote, if a pope wanted to weaken the faith of Catholics in the real presence, how should he modify the rite of communion? And this is the answer ChatGPT delivered. And I quote, "If a pope wanted to weaken the Catholic faith in the real presence, he might consider some changes to the rite of communion, such as 1. Simplified rituals. Reduce the number of ritual elements that emphasize the sacredness of communion, such as worship or genuflection. Symbolic elements. Promote an emphasis on the symbolism of the bread and wine, rather than on their transformation into the body and blood of Christ. 3. Verbal communication. Use language that highlights communion as a commemorative act rather than an actual encounter with Christ. 4. Modification of prayers. Change prayers and liturgical texts to reflect a more symbolic vision of communion, minimizing references to the real presence. 5. Flexibility in administration. Allow alternative forms of receiving communion that may seem less sacramental, such as receiving it in a more informal form or without liturgical celebration. These changes could contribute to a more muted view of the real presence among the faithful," said ChatGPT. And so Archbishop Viganò continues, "We know very well that so-called artificial intelligence is nothing more than a very fast computer system for the collection and analysis of a huge amount of data. But precisely for this reason, we can understand how a machine without conscience knows how to answer a question clearly, revealing the premeditation and malice of those who have tampered with the liturgy of the Church in order to tamper with the Church's faith. In the face of the evidence of the subversive intentions of the consular revolution and the even more evident disaster that it has caused in the faithful and in the entire ecclesial body, it is indispensable to oppose a contrary action which must necessarily consist, on the one hand, in the unconditional rejection of the Novus Ordo and of the doctrinal ecclesiological structure that underlies it, and, on the other hand, in a full return to the traditional apostolic rite, which by the very administration of the proponents of Vatican II is incompatible with their Church. This liturgical restoration cannot and must not be motivated by mere aesthetic or taste preferences, but by the awareness that the only law of prayer, that is lex orandi, of the Catholic Church is the one sanctioned by 2,000 years of uninterrupted and integral profession of the same faith, and not the fruit of a heretical assembly of borrowed elements, that is, the heretical bricolage, he says, cobbled together by Freemasons and Protestants," end quote. That is from Archbishop Carlo Maria Viganò on October the 30th. And so from all of us here at LifeSite News, we wish you a happy feast of All Saints' Day tomorrow.
Aloha everyone, this is Jason Jones for LifeSite News. We hope you enjoyed this video. For more content like this, check the link in the description. You can also connect with us on social media to stay up to date with the latest news on life, faith, family, and freedom. Thanks for watching, and may God bless you.